Happy Friday! This is River. River is my kitty. She doesn't want to be held right now, but River is about 7 years old. She loves to wear sweaters. She loves to snuggle, and she loves her cat treats. That is for sure. Well, I wanted to read chapter 2 of The Magician's Nephew today. Yesterday we left off where Polly literally disappeared. So we're moving on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is titled Digory and His Uncle. It was so sudden and so horribly unlike anything that had ever happened to Digory, even in a nightmare, that he let out a scream. Instantly, Uncle Andrew's hand was over his mouth. "None of that," he hissed in Digory's ear. "If you start making a noise, your mother will hear it, and you know what a fright that might do to her." As Digory said afterward, the horrible meanness of getting at a chap in that way almost made him sick. But of course he didn't scream again. "That's better," said Uncle Andrew. "Perhaps you couldn't help it. It is a shock when you first see someone vanish. Why, it gave me even a turn when the guinea pig did the other night." "Was that when you yelled?" asked Digory. "Oh, you heard that, did you? I hope you haven't been spying on me." "No, I haven't," said Digory indignantly. "But what's happened to Polly?" "Congratulate me, my dear boy," said Uncle Andrew, rubbing his hands. "My experiment has succeeded. The little girl's gone, vanished, right out of this world." "What have you done to her?" "Sent her to, well, another place." "What do you mean, another place?" asked Digory. Uncle Andrew sat down and said, "Well, I'll tell you all about it. Have you ever heard of Mrs. Old LeFay?" "Wasn't she a great aunt or something?" said Digory. "Not exactly," said Uncle Andrew. "She was my godmother. That's her, there, on the wall." Digory had looked and saw a faded photograph. It showed the face of an old woman in a bonnet, and he could remember now that he had once seen a photo of the same face in an old drawer at home in the country. He had asked Mother who it was, and Mother had not seemed to want to talk about the subject much. It was not at all a nice face, Digory thought, though of course with all those early photographs no one could really tell. Wasn't there something wrong with her, Uncle Andrew?" he said. "Well," said Uncle Andrew with a chuckle, "it depends on what you call wrong. People are so narrow-minded. She certainly got very queer later in life. Did very many unwise things. That's why they shut her up." "In an asylum, do you mean?" "Oh, no, said Uncle Andrew in a shocked voice. "Nothing of that sort. Only in prison." "I say," said Digory, "what had she done?" "Ah, poor woman," said Uncle Andrew. "She had been very unwise. There were a very good many different things. We needn't go into all of that. She wasn't always very kind to me. But look here. What has this all got to do with Polly? I do wish you'd—" "All in good time, my boy," said Uncle Andrew. "They let Miss Old LeFay out before she died, and I was one of the very few people whom she'd allow to see in her last illness. She had got to dislike ordinary, ignorant people, you understand. I do myself. But she and I were interested in the same sort of things. It was only a few days before her death that she told me to go into an old brewer in her house, open a secret drawer, and bring her a little box that I would find there. The moment I picked up that box, I could tell by the prickling in my fingers that I held some great secret in my hands. She gave it to me and made me promise that as soon as she was dead, I would burn it, unopened, with certain ceremonies. That promise I did not keep." "Well, then that was jolly rotten of you," said Digory. "Rotten?" said Uncle Andrew with a puzzled look. "Oh, I see. You mean that little boys ought to keep their promises. Very true. Most right and proper, I'm sure, and I'm very glad that you've been taught to do it. But of course, you must understand the rules of that sort, however excellent they may be for little boys and servants and women, and even people in general, can't possibly be expected to apply to profound students and great thinkers and sages. No, Digory, men like me who possess hidden wisdom are freed from common rules, just as we are cut off from common pleasures. Ours, my boy, is a high and lonely destiny." As he said this, he sighed and looked so grave and noble and mysterious that for a second Digory really thought that he was saying something rather fine. But then he remembered the ugly look he had seen on his uncle's face that moment before Polly had vanished. and all at once he saw through Uncle Andrew's grand words. All it means, he said to himself, is that he thinks he can do anything he likes to get anything he wants. Of course, said Uncle Andrew. I didn't dare open the box for a long time, for I knew it might contain something highly dangerous. For my godmother was a very remarkable woman. The truth is, she was one of the last mortals in this country who had fairy blood in her. She said there had been 2 others in her time. In fact, Digory, you are now talking to the last man, possibly, who really had a fairy godmother. There, that'll be something for you to remember when you are an old man yourself. I bet she was a bad fairy, thought Digory, and added out loud, but what about Polly? How do you harp on that, said Uncle Andrew, as if it was what mattered. My first task, of course, was to study the box itself. It was very ancient, and I knew enough, even though to know that it wasn't Greek or Old Egyptian or Babylonian or Hittite or Chinese. It was older than any of those nations. It was a great day when I last found out the truth. The box was Atlantean. It came from the lost island of Atlantis. That meant it was centuries older than any of the Stone Age things they dig up in Europe. And it wasn't a rough, crude-looking thing either. For in the very dawn of time, Atlantis was already a great city with palaces and temples and learned men. He paused for a moment as if he expected Digory to say something, but Digory was disliking his uncle more and more every minute, and so he said nothing. Meanwhile, continued Uncle Andrew, I was learning a good deal in other ways. It wouldn't be proper to explain them to a child, about magic in general. That meant that I came to have a fair idea of what sort of things might be in the box. By various tests, I narrowed down the possibilities. I had got to know some, devilish queer people and go through some very disagreeable experiences. That is what turned my hair gray. One doesn't become a magician for nothing. My health broke down in the end, but I got better, and at last I knew. Although there was not really the least chance of anyone overhearing them, he leaned forward and almost whispered as he said, The Atlantean box contained something that had been brought from another world when our world was only just beginning. What? Asked Digory, who was now interested in spite of himself. Only dust, said Uncle Andrew. Fine, dry dust. Nothing much to look at, not much to show for a lifetime of toil, you might say, but when I looked at that dust, I took jolly good care not to touch it, and thought that every grain had once been in another world. I don't mean another planet, you know. They're part of our world, and you could get to them if you went far enough. But really, another world, another nature, another universe. Somewhere you would never reach even if you traveled through the space of this universe forever and ever. A world that could only be reached by magic. Well, here Uncle Andrew rubbed his hands till his knuckles cracked like fireworks. I knew, he went on, that if you only could get it back into the right form, the dust would draw you back to the place it had come from. But my difficulty was to get it into the right form. My earlier experiments were all failures. I tried them on guinea pigs, some only died, some exploded like little bombs. It was a jolly cruel thing to do, said Digory, who had once had a guinea pig of his own. How do you keep getting off the point, said Uncle Andrew. That is what the creatures were for. I'd bought them myself. Let me see, where was I? Yes. At last, I succeeded in making the rings. The yellow rings. But no, a new difficulty arose. I'm pretty sure now that the yellow ring would only send a creature that touched it into the other place. But what good would that be if I couldn't get them back to tell me what they found there? And what about them, said Digory. A nice mess they'd be in if they couldn't get back. You will keep looking at everything from the wrong point of view, said Uncle Andrew with a look of impatience. Can't you understand that the thing is a great experiment? The whole point of sending anyone into the other place is that I want to find out what it's like. Well, why don't you just go yourself then? Digory had hardly ever seen anyone look so surprised and offended as his uncle did at this simple question. Me? Me? He explained. The boy must be mad. A man at my time of life, in my state of health, to risk the shock of dangers being flung suddenly into a different universe. I've never heard anything so preposterous in my life. Do you realize what you're saying? Think of what another world means. You might mean anything. Anything. "And I suppose you sent Polly into it then," said Digory. His cheeks were flaming with anger now. "And all I can say," he added, "even if you are my uncle, is that you behave like a coward, sending a little girl to a place you are afraid to go yourself." "Silence, sir," said Uncle Andrew, bringing his hand down on the table. "I will not be talked to like that by a little, dirty schoolboy. You don't understand. I'm a great scholar, a magician, the adept, the one doing the experiment. Of course, I need subjects to do it on. Bless my soul, you'll be telling me next that I ought to have asked the guinea pigs permission before I use them. No, great wisdom can be reached without sacrifice. But the idea of going myself is ridiculous. It's like asking a general to fight as a common soldier. Supposingly I got killed, what would become of my life's work?" "Oh, stop jawing," said Digory. "Are you going to bring Polly back?" "I was going to tell you when you so rudely interrupted me," said Uncle Andrew, "that I did find a way of doing the return journey. The green rings draw you back." "But Polly doesn't have a green ring." "No," said Uncle Andrew with a cruel smile. "Then she can't get back," shouted Digory, "and it's exactly the same as if you murdered her." "She can get back," said Uncle Andrew, "if someone else were to go after her wearing the yellow ring himself and taking 2 green rings, one to bring himself back and one to bring her back." And we do have a picture of Uncle Andrew right here. Tall, lengthy, you can see his crazy hair. He looks pretty kept. He's got a suit. Still creepy. And now, of course, Digory saw the trap in which he was caught. He stared at Uncle Andrew, saying nothing, with his mouth wide open. His cheeks had gone very pale. "I hope," said Uncle Andrew, presently in a very high and mighty voice, just as if he were a perfect uncle who had given a handsome tip and good advice, "I hope, Digory, you are not given to showing the white feather. I should be very sorry to think that anyone in our family had not enough honor and chivalry to go to the aid of, a lady in distress." "Oh, shut up," said Digory. "If you had any honor at all, you'd be going yourself. But I know you won't. All right, I see what I've got to do, but you are a beast. I suppose you planned the thing the whole time so that she'd go without knowing it and I'd have to go after her." "Of course," said Uncle Andrew with his hateful smile. "Very well, I'll go, but there's one thing I jolly well mean to say first. I didn't believe in magic till today, and now I see it's real. Well, if it is, I suppose the old fairy tales are more or less true, and you are simply wicked, cruel magician like the ones in the stories. And I've never read a story in which people of that sort weren't paid out in the end, and I bet you will be too, and it will serve you right." Of all the things Digory had said, this was the first that really went home. Uncle Andrew started, and there came over his face a look of such horror. Beast though he was, you could almost feel sorry for him. But a second later, he smoothed it all away, and he said with a rather forced laugh, "Ha! Well, well, I suppose it is a natural thing for a child to think, brought up among women, as you have been. Old wives' tales, eh? I don't think you need to worry about my danger, Digory. Wouldn't it be better to worry about the danger of your little friend? She's been gone for some time. If there are any dangers over there, well, it would be a pity to arrive a moment too late." "A lot you care," said Digory fiercely. "But I'm sick of this job. What have I got to do?" "You really must learn to control your temper, my boy," said Uncle Andrew coolly. "Otherwise you'll grow up to be just like your Aunt Letty. Now, attend to me." He got up, put a pair of gloves on, and walked over to the tray that contained the rings. "They only work," he said, "if they are actually touching your skin. Wearing gloves, I can pick them up like this, and nothing happens. If you carried one in your pocket, nothing would happen, but of course you'd have to be careful not to put your hand in your pocket and touch it by accident. That moment you touch the yellow ring, you will vanish out of this world. When you are in the other place, I expect, of course this hasn't been tested yet, but I would expect that the moment you touch the green ring, you vanish out of that world and reappear in this one. Now take these 2 greens and drop them into your right-hand pocket. Remember very carefully which pocket the greens are in. G for green, R for right, GR, you see, which are the first 2 letters of green. One for you and one for the little girl. And now you pick up a yellow one for yourself. I should put it on your finger if I were you. There'll be less chance of dropping it." Digory had almost picked up the yellow ring when he suddenly checked himself. "Look here," he said. "What about Mother? Supposing she asks where I am?" "The sooner you go, the sooner you'll be back," said Uncle Andrew cheerfully. but you don't really know whether I can get back. Uncle Andrew shrugged his shoulders, walked across to the door, unlocked it, threw it open, and said, "Oh, very well then. Just as you please. Go down, have your dinner, leave the little girl to be eaten by wild animals, or drowned, or starved, or in the other world, or just lost there for good. If that's what you prefer. It's all one to me. Perhaps before tea time you'd better drop in on Mrs. Plummer and explain to her that she'll never see her daughter again because you were afraid to put on a ring." "By gum," said Digory, "don't I just wish I was big enough to punch your head." Then he buttoned up his coat, took a deep breath, and picked up the ring. And he thought then, as he always thought afterward too, that he could not have decently have done anything else. And that is the end of chapter 2. Tomorrow we will read The Wood Between the Worlds. It's going to get interesting, guys. It's going to get interesting. Stay tuned. Happy Friday. Love and support you. And we'll see you tomorrow.